Hello everyone, welcome to the December OpenCorp Facebook Q&A session, the final one of 2019, the festive Merry Christmas one. On my right here, Michael, I'm an encyclopedia on Property Beresford, and on my left, Amanda, know everything there is to know about borrowing from a bank, Gleig. Welcome to the show, got a great show in store for you tonight, lots and lots to talk about, looking forward to your questions, and very much looking forward to the show, so thanks for tuning in. Oh.
Just turn your volume.
TV's talking back at me. Sorry, everybody. You can probably hear that. Amateur hour here.
You're still in your L plates, Al, when it comes to, driving this thing, mate.
It's freaked me out.
There we go. All right, we're good.
I've just seen a picture. The hat looks amazing, so thank you.
It's very symmetrical.
It's a Christmas tree, in case anyone's wondering. So, big year in property, I guess. Look, why don't we start there? And we talked about it before the show. And if I look at last year, this time last year, we were talking as a business, and I stood in front of the business and I said to them, this is the hardest year it's been in 30 years. Next year is going to be much better. And much to all our disappointment, I guess, we kicked off the year in worse conditions and it probably followed through till about May. We talk about it a bit, but it then improved quite a bit. So pretty topsy-turvy year in property. And I guess, you know, you guys are at the coalface talking to clients day after day and week after week, and you probably see the emotional roller coaster they go through at times. But tell us about some of the things you guys have seen during the year.
You're the guest, Amanda. Do you want to kick off?
Oh gosh. I mean,
or do you want me to buy you a couple of minutes while you think about it?
I mean, it's definitely been a roller coaster year from a lending perspective. We kind of started the year with lots of announcements around all sorts of things changing with APRA and ASIC and, you know, lending regulations, and different banks had different takes on all of that. So it's been interesting to see how that's evolved pre-Royal Commission and then also post-Royal Commission. The commission that we
Seems
had
like 5 years ago.
That's right.
What was that? Was that February?
I forgot it happened this year. That much has happened. I forgot that one was in there.
A few months ago now, it's old news. So yeah, literally we've seen, I guess, a readaptation of, you know, lending standards and had to adapt to that. It's definitely tougher, you know, than it was to get a loan 12 months ago. And I think it's, you know, interesting times to see even when that will kind of, you know, come back into a little bit of more reasonable lending, you know, policies and things like that to allow people to borrow the money they should be able to.
Yeah. Hey, it's great to be back, everyone. I missed last month. I was doing a national roadshow with the events that we host, teaching people about property investment. And one of the things that I had said in one of those presentations that was received quite well was, I said, you know, 2019's been that classic year that we refer to as investment mentors and investment specialists as a really good reminder of why it's important to do what you can do as soon as you can do it and hold for the long term. Because if we're sitting here 12 months ago and we said, hey, in the next 12 months, there's going to be a banking royal commission, the findings are going to come out. The recommendation is that brokers should be sacked because the CEO of CBA, who has the biggest direct lending through their retail channel, thinks that's a good idea. Perceived conflict of interest, disclaimer. We're going to have an election. Negative gearing might go away. It might stay in some shape or form. Lending restrictions will get harder. Then they'll get easier. And Trump will still be talking to China. No one would do anything. But hello, the sun's come up this morning. It'll come up tomorrow. And all things considered, the market is in better shape now than what it was 12 months ago. You know, I read something during the week where even some of these research houses are forecasting that Melbourne and Sydney prices will be back to their 2017 peaks by you know, March to June next year.
Yep. Yeah. Got to be really careful here because we always talk about, and we'll keep talking about the fact that you don't buy a property hoping for growth in 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, or even a year. But the stats are showing that this has been the sharpest growth in the property market in the last 15 odd years over the last period of time. Now, that's excellent, and, you know, good on people who are buying during that time when there's a bit of doom and gloom. But I think what's important is people understanding that property is cyclical. So we always talk to our clients, we say, look, 7 years are good, 3 years of correction. 7 years are good, 3 years of correction is a typical cycle. We've been through that, we're at the bottom end of it, and we're starting to ramp back up. But if people are following the fundamentals, buying for the right reasons, buying when they can, as you just said, then they're going to do well in a market regardless.
Well, it's we won't fill tonight with a whole bunch of cliches, hopefully, but you know, old mate Warren Buffett that you love, you know, says be greedy. Buffet, be greedy when people are fearful and fearful when people are greedy. This is a classic case of that.
Yeah.
You know, and the only thing that has really changed on a large scale is consumer confidence. Obviously, we were talking to clients 6 months ago at our client nights about the triple threat.
Yeah.
With our basketball theme that was coalition being re-elected, APRA restrictions being loosened with the banks and interest rates coming down, that was going to have a positive effect on confidence and therefore the market. We don't have a crystal ball. Clearly, that's what's happened. But there are some really key drivers that, or key indicators that drive the market. And it's important to stay focused on those as opposed to what the paper's telling us on any particular day.
Yeah, the luck we have in this office is everyone's property centric. So the conversations, they understand what's happening, but you read the paper every day. It'd be very easy to take yourself off the edge of the building because you're like, oh, it's never going to come good. It's horrible. Where do I go from here? But reality is when you start to delve into some of the things that either they're saying or you can read for yourself, you see that it's not doom and gloom. There's some real positive signs happening, and it's not just green shoots in the market. It's the undersupply of property, the population growth, the unemployment rate coming down, all these things, all coupled together. Well, that's great news, but the paper's not going to sell that with that on the front page.
Have you guys read anything in the press about the vacancy rate in Melbourne and Brisbane at all in the last 3 months? Hasn't got any airtime whatsoever, right? The vacancy rate's down under 2% in Melbourne and Brisbane. And for property investors, that means a couple of things. It means much tighter lack of supply. Rents will go up. That'll force more competition, people into buying properties. That'll drive growth. It's a good story, but the boring data doesn't sell papers.
No, that's right.
My favourite was actually either side of election day, exactly the same news outlet posted polar opposite headlines 2 days apart. So on Friday before the election, it was Sydney and Melbourne house prices will continue to crash and sell all forever, hold your peace type stuff. On the Sunday afterwards, it's like prices going to boom and recover and it's going to be happy days and Cam's rose-coloured glasses will be great. And, it's really, we have a bit of fun with it, right?
Oh, right.
We have a bit of fun with it, right? But the nuts and bolts of it are that I don't know a property market that changes every 48 hours. Understand the fundamentals rather than the hype.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted, so Amanda, who introduced at the start as the guru of knowing everything about banking, but Amanda's a senior lender in our business and she's a broker who, I guess her job is to understand what the banks are doing any given day, where the rates are, where the best deal you can get is, et cetera, and we had some great wins during the year, which I think right at the start, we say one client 18,000, one 21,000, and it might just be worth putting some, I guess, some fat around those stories and how they come about and why it happened for people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, the biggest thing that we see from time to time, in the business is people that have what we call lazy home loans. So people that are coming to us and, they're just getting started on their investment journey. And potentially they've had a home loan that's been in place for, 5, 10, some clients even 15 years. And, all the bank's doing is just rubbing their hands together and saying, yeah, got you. So potentially they might have approached their bank for some pricing, not been very successful. Could have been the fact that they just, haven't even thought about it, hasn't occurred to them to do anything like that. So, when clients like that do come across our desk, not only are we looking for how do we help them with the property that they're purchasing, but also any existing loans that they do have. So...
Come on. That was great.
Christmas is over.
Done. So we're basically just looking for any way possible to improve cash flow for clients, looking for solutions to basically get them into better loans to improve their structure, get strategies in place, and
I think it'd be really easy.
To be had.
And tell me if I'm wrong, but it's really easy to get your home loan, especially if it's owner occupier, and go, that's done. I hunted, I worked my butt off, I've got a place. Now I just get used to paying it off, and it must be really easy to sit there for 5 years, as you said, and just go,
absolutely.
I've got my house and we're all good.
The bank likes to make you really sticky. So then you have your business banking with them and you have your savings and your credit card and potentially, you'll take out a personal loan to buy a car and, banks, again, just rubbing their hands together because it's too much of an effort for people to leave. But, with a couple of hours worth of paperwork, we can be saving people, like I said, 18, 20.
Well, probably what's the first, sorry, Boz.
No, go.
I was going to say, what's the first step? So I don't think the first step's a couple of hours, is it? The first step's 3 minutes.
Probably.
It's pretty simple, I think. Like, what is
our likes are shortcuts, right?
Shortcuts.
Give me the executive summary.
As Boz said, I'm directing my communication style. Just give me the info. I'll deal with it.
I mean, it can be as easy as give us, your home loan amounts and your interest rates. We can lick you very quickly. Say, look, here's the potential savings. If there are some savings to be had, then it's a case of, yes, probably, 20 minutes worth of paperwork to actually analyse, well, you know, can you service a loan, and, you know, what bank might that fit with?
The conversation I've been having a lot with clients lately, and you know, because you're helping them with the finance, but the potential gain is so much greater than the bit of a saving on a home loan. Like, that's good, but you know, if you think about, if you're able to save yourself $2,000 or $3,000 a year, with where interest rates are today, that holds you an investment property for nothing out of your pocket. If you have equity, you're holding that property for free. And let's say that doubles over a 10-year period, then it's $300,000, $400,000, $600,000 that refinance has made you just by having your cash flow optimized.
Definitely.
You know, and second to that is obviously, don't ask. It flies in the face of all logic to me, but banks seem to be offering and far more willing to offer benefits to new customers as opposed to existing customers. So the loyalty is kind of not there like it was in the 60s when the bank manager signed off on the loan. There are some amazing, you know, cashback deals and incentives that you can get even up front.
Absolutely.
Christmas presents paid for, you know, for everyone.
And beyond.
Right, and holidays and whatever else, just by being prepared to spend a bit of time and effort. So review them for sure.
But even by doing a refinance, you know, banks and serviceability at the moment is based on the existing term of your loan. So if you've got a loan in place that you've had for 10 years, you've only got 20 years remaining on it, refinancing that potentially and, you know, extending the term. Obviously some caveats around, you know, repayments and things on that. But, you know, that can buy you potentially borrowing capacity to buy another property even. So
I'm a glass half full guy. So Boz just said that $3,000 can buy a property. So 18,000 saving, that's 6 properties. And in 10 years, that's $3.5 million. It's not bad going getting a refinance done.
A couple of hours of paperwork.
The other thing we were talking about, and Boz and I caught up last Saturday night, and all we talk about is our Facebook Q&A. So we just put a heap of homework into exactly what we're going to talk about tonight, because it's so important to us. No, it is.
You should have worn those shoes. They're really good. They match that Christmas hat.
What we were talking about, and it prompted that something we should raise tonight, was that as people go into the festive season, and I think the question came to me from Boz, like, you're going to keep training, you go to the gym, or your diet, whatever. And I was like, the moment my routine's out, everything's out the window, gym's gone, food's bad, nothing matters anymore, it's just whatever's happening. But when I'm in a routine, I'm great. I'll eat pretty much the same things day to day, week to week. I'll be at the gym the same times every week. I'll be there, make sure right on the time. Once the routine's out, that's all out the window for me. And Boz started obviously talking about and saying, well, that applies to so much more in life. And we talked about the people with 5-year loans that have been sitting there, the routine of hunting for a house and talking to your broker and getting your things right, that's gone. And you go on holidays and everything out the window with your investment plan. So what do you see people doing in that regard? Like, is it holidays? What is it that breaks the routine, and where's the dangers?
That's
it's a long question.
No, it's a really good question around. I think anything, it's as simple as anything that's not routine can break it. And it's really easy. You know, a couple of days here and there might be okay. But like I said, I've been doing a national roadshow. My routine for someone who's highly routine driven was out the window for about 3 weeks. Just because I have my set days that I exercise. My wife has her set days where she exercises. And that's our routine. And if you miss one, then, you know, it's stiff. You got to wait.
So you could do it on hers. It was crazy. It was all out the window. I trained on Beck's day and she trained on my day.
So, you know, it just, and so everyone travels for work, and especially at this time of year when things are crazy, it's just constantly remind yourself that routine drives success. Review your rates on an annual basis, you know, engage, do that. They can be proactively feeding you that information. It can be 0 minutes of effort if you've got the right people in your team. Likewise with exercise and so on. But I guess over 16 years of investing, the thing that I consistently bring myself back to is do what you can when you can, understand your position. And if at any point I feel like, oh, there's been some change and I don't know where I'm at, that's the trigger for me to refocus, get back in routine, assess where you're at and move forward.
What do you find?
Yeah, I think people just think it's a lot more effort than it actually is. You know, it doesn't take much to shoot off an email and say, look, here's my situation. Can you have a quick review? And, you know, working with a great broker that can actually be proactive in trying to facilitate those discussions and getting in touch with you. If we do, please don't ignore us. We're there to help.
Well, we hear it's everywhere about wage growth's flat and all the doom and gloom around wage growth. if you've got debt and there's some advantage, give yourself a pay rise.
Definitely.
Yeah, and if I think about the routine bit, and we know Cam, and the viewers know Cam, and he's one of the most relaxed guys going around. But as he says in his book, and it's really relevant, is he just puts little simple things in place that make life easy. Quarterly review. I sit down, do a quarterly review on my portfolio. Are the rents coming in? Have the rents gone up? Have I done maintenance? What are they? Move on to the next thing and the next thing. It's all just structured for him throughout the year. He doesn't think about it. He does it. It's in the diary. There I go. I do it. The routine's there for him. So it's really important every facet, especially investing, as you said. It's knowing about when I can duplicate, because duplication's the key. It's about knowing, what are you looking at my screen for?
I just want to see how the questions
You
are coming
can't handle it, can you?
Oh,
I'm the host.
missed 1 month and just ditched. Just bumped to the passenger seat. Don't step on my
I
territory.
just loved it so much last month. It's about
Thanks, Kate. I missed you too. Appreciate it.
when can I duplicate? And that's fundamentally the key thing you're looking for. All the other steps in your investing strategy or process are how do I get to that next property. Thanks, Boz, for stealing the screen.
Kate just said hi. Just saying hi back.
Yep. Thanks for the positive comments on my hat. It was itching my head, so I had to go. We've got a question here. Sorry.
No.
Well, I'm hosting. All right.
You drive, mate.
The question
the
is, if I invest in Resi Fund and add small regular repayments, does this still count as a good savings record as far as the bank goes? Amanda, it's probably a good question for you. So obviously what Resi Fund is, people can invest into the big portfolio of properties that we own in our fund, and we have a savings plan. So people can do incremental, weekly, monthly, whatever they want, installments into that. So over time their investment's growing. And I guess just to paraphrase a bit further, the banks like to see when someone's borrowing money that you have a capacity and a propensity to put money aside and be structured in your savings plan. So Amanda, over to you. Would the banks consider that a structured savings plan?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Resi Fund, we'd have to kind of think about when we can get money back from that. But whether you're putting money into a bank account or into shares or into Resi Fund, that is genuine savings. You know, it's an investment held in your name. You've had the discipline of building up those savings. They're just working harder for you than they would be in a bank account. So if we were to take those funds down the track and put them towards buying a house, then absolutely, the bank would see that favourably.
Yeah, awesome.
Yep. And why is that so important to a bank? Obviously, it's a really integral thing to them, and people are paying rent and they've got a certain amount of money, but why is saving money such an important part for the bank?
I guess the bank wants to see a capacity to repay, and they want to see surplus funds. So they want to see that, you know, when you do take out further lending with them, they're not putting you into any kind of financial hardship. So, you know, the healthier your savings look, or, you know, if you're paying rent and that rent would cease and you could put that into paying a mortgage, just paints, I guess, a character picture to the bank that you're actually going to be able to service that loan and you're an attractive client.
So it's your financial CV.
Absolutely.
You go into a loan interview and you got to put your best foot forward.
Here's my resume.
Yep.
By the way, I've been
Give me
paying
some
all
money.
this rent or investing all this money, and it's free and available for me to now be repaying a loan.
The other thing that that I found over the years is we think that banks are in the business of lending money. Really, the banks are in the business of mitigating risk. So they want to, you know, when we see I think back to the GFC, valuations were super conservative. The banks were only willing to lend money to people that had massive buffers, and the way that they could identify massive buffers were to reduce valuation. So people could only proceed if they had the ability to cover the shortfall. Didn't mean that the market value of the property was any different. You just had to have extra left over and be a really strong candidate to get money at that point.
Yep. The other thing that Boz and I talked about at our Q&A catch-up the other day was going into the festive season. We all tend to catch up with relatives and friends and social gatherings, and clearly tonight, everyone, we thank you for choosing us over going out and doing Christmas things. It's good of you. But one of the key things, and we're big on it in our business, is dream crushes. Now, it might not apply so much in the lending space, but Boz comes across it every day, and everybody comes across it every day, whether it's I'm thinking about getting a new job, you're an idiot, stick in your current job you've got, through to I'm going to buy an investment property. Well, you're an idiot, don't buy an investment property because my Uncle Johnny 43 years ago lost some money on it, and you will too. Dream crushes are real and they're out there. What's the advice for people going into this period where they're going to be talking to people or meeting with lots of different people, how they handle it, what they do? What do you guys do? Like, what's the tools?
So a tool that I keep in my kit bag for anything is the 6 Ps. The 6 Ps is prior preparation prevents piss poor performance.
How are we going tonight?
We're rocking, mate, except your hat was kind of got us all by surprise. You need a bit of spice sometimes. The cinnamon's for free. So the 6 Ps, and it's just being aware that you might get this kind of negativity. Let's be honest, 90% of Australians don't invest. 99% of Australians don't invest well. So whether it's investing, whether you're the one person out of your group of 20 friends that likes Indian and no one else does, and you say, hey, I think we should go to Indian, you cop a barrage of abuse. It's no different, right? It's just a differing opinion, but we have to do something differently, and those that understand it can be successful. So I think just being prepared for that. And for some people, that's keeping it private. For other people, it's actually trying to help those understand, the different perspectives. So what do you think's risky about it? Why shouldn't I do it? What's my alternative? Pretty quickly, the oxygen gets absorbed because they don't know. It's no longer an opinion. They have to be educated, and they're not. That's a pretty elegant way to be able to handle that.
What are you going to be doing at 60? Here's what I'm going to be doing at 60. So tell me how I get there with your strategy versus what I'm trying to do. They're the things that...
Has the property that you live in, Al, has that gone up in value since you bought it?
I hope so.
Why is it such a bad move for me to do the same but have a tenant and the government paying most of the holding costs for me? It's just being able to be armed with a couple of questions that you can ask back that can elegantly knock that negativity.
Yeah, the other way to handle it is just to politely, not shut it down, but change the topic. Oh, sky's blue. It's nice up there today.
That's a great one.
The snag's cooked. Let's have a look. Move away from it, because the negativity will absolutely kill you. And if you get it enough, it absolutely wipes out any chance you've got of going and doing it yourself. Because we talk, what do we say? If you go to the MCG Grand Final, there's 100,000 people, 60 of them? 63 people have got more than 6 investment properties. Well, guess what? Pretty quickly you pummel to a pulp and you've given up and thrown out of the stand for being stupid. When in reality, you're the smartest one in the ground, but you haven't quite got the point of being confident enough to do it. So,
and this is really fresh. This is someone who was introduced to us by the brother of a client who's also a client. So, a really positive experience of how that word has spread, throughout, I guess, people's different networks. And these guys had Darren and his wife had quite a negative experience around investing and so forth. Were still focused positively, right? But came in and basically asked us a bunch of questions around how would those things that went wrong be protected, if they were to partner with us. So it was just a really great example of a positive glass half full attitude to overcome and not let one experience impact things, but learn how to mitigate risk in the same time.
And leveraging that, Boz, and you'd come across it much more than me, absolutely much more, but I came across one today where someone's had a bad experience previously and their head's in the sand, investing's bad, it's not for me. But if you take that and silo it and you look at everyone else out there, all our clients and us and everyone investing who's doing really well out of it, how do you bring them out of the doldrums and give them that confidence that off they can go, little pat on the bum, it will work, and let them believe it and they'll watch it happen? Because it's so hard if your first experience has been a bad one. And the bad one comes from all the things we talk about, being local real estate agent. Have you got a property? Of course I have. Here it is. Too much out of pocket. Property needs maintenance issues. You got the wrong loan, whatever it might be. Through to, okay, I'm up and away and it's now working and working properly because I've got a process and a structure. As I said, you'd see it much more often than I do, but how hard is it to move them forward? And does it happen? Can they get back on the wheels and go again?
Oh, 100% it happens. I guess we can help with that. It really comes down to the mindset of the potential investor. But the question that I ask, and it requires them to be pretty, put their ego in their back pocket and be pretty transparent about it. What went wrong and why? And then, why do you think that happened? And then unpack that and just show them how it can be done a better way, to be able to ensure that those things don't happen again. And, typically apply a process that has a proven track record. That's the kind of first place to start.
So we've got some questions here. Let's get into them. Got a question from Quentin. Someone from OpenCorp's commenting Zaji Barji between me and Boz. I am the host. That is it. There's no more discussion
between you.
And no more questions about that. That's just finished. Take that off. All right. So, hey guys, would you borrow up to 90% LVR to tap into equity to duplicate quicker, or is it not worth the consequences given that you're stung with LMI and lose some negotiating power? Both of you can probably answer this, but Amanda can answer about the borrowing. Boz, the philosophy of it, it's probably a great one for you to answer because
Yeah,
you do it
it's great
day in,
one for
day
Boz
out.
to
What I
answer
was
it.
thinking was we should run a poll on who you'd prefer to be the driver, whether it should be me or Al, and just let us know what you think. We'll take a straw poll at the end, and the winner will drive
That's what I said, we've done the
first one
poll.
off for 2020.
We've done the poll, I got
Mate,
it.
it's all about the viewers, mate.
No,
We're
it's
here
not-
for
it's
their
not about the
questions.
viewers, it's about how I
all
feel when
about
I'm
you.
driving it.
So let me read the question.
No,
No.
I meant to say to you. And you just
Ah,
answered
yes.
it. So would you take LMI at 90% to buy another property, or would you not do that because there's consequences of the costs incurred with LMI?
LMI is some of the best money that you'll ever spend. You need to view it differently for investments rather than your own home. The reason for that is it's tax deductible first and foremost, so it's not nearly as expensive as what you think it might be. And the second thing is that you can use the equity in your properties to pay for the LMI. It's not like you've got to have it in cash. More specifically though, if you have two properties, each with a 10% deposit plus costs, and you incur 2 lots of LMI, then let's say after tax, that's what, $6,000 per property, ballpark? Yeah. So that's $12,000 total LMI to hold 2 properties rather than 1. I'm pretty sure that the second property is going to grow by more than 12 grand in the time it took you to create that extra 10% in equity to duplicate and keep it at 20%.
So what's the average property price? We'll use 600.
Let's use 600.
I'm going to test your maths. And property grows by 8.
Yep.
8%. What have they made in the first year?
48,000.
48. So they spent 12.
After 3 months, you're basically breaking.
They made 4 times their money.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're all pretty transparent on this. I've paid LMI on over 80% of my investment portfolio.
Yep.
Yep.
And the key is maximise the amount of money you can get in your hand to grow the asset value that will grow in value.
Yeah.
Yep. Amanda, in terms of borrowing LMI, the second part of the
Yeah.
question there, is it problematic? Is it costly? What do you see?
Oh, I mean, costly is all relative. It's not necessarily problematic. You know, most banks these days will offer you a similar rate, whether you're borrowing 80% or 90%. So really the only difference is the mortgage insurance premium. Sometimes there can be different policies that apply between borrowing at 80% where the bank has the final decision compared to borrowing at 90% where a mortgage insurer does come into play.
Yep.
But for the most part, most people should have no issues borrowing up to 90% on investment.
Yeah. And we talk about not speculating in property, but if I asked you to invest 12,000 and give you 48,000 back in 12 months' time, you
I'll
happy
take
with
5
it?
of them.
Sign me up.
The Bank of Al.
Absolutely. So next question from Marcus, and Marcus, you're good with the questions every time. Thank you. What is the process with using a guarantor with no deposit to buy a house?
Great question.
Okay, so the question would be around security guarantors. So someone who has equity within their property can offer their property as additional security for the bank to help purchase your particular property.
So let's use an example. Mum and dad.
Mum and dad. So mum and dad have a house. Let's say it's worth $500,000.
Yep.
For the purpose of our exercise, it's unencumbered, so it's got no lending link to it.
Not a mum and dad. Good job.
Paid off their home, winning. So I want to go and buy a house, and I wanted to borrow 100% of that or 105% to cover all of my deposit and costs. So to avoid mortgage insurance, the bank will lend me up to 80% of the property that I'm seeking to buy. And the other 20%, they're going to lend me, secured by both the property that I'm buying and by mum and dad's property, so that they have that extra security to avoid us paying mortgage insurance. So it enables me as the borrower to borrow all of the money that I need and all of the costs to fund the purchase, not put in any cash of my own, provided mum and dad are happy for me to, use their property.
So can mum and dad secure their investment there?
Yeah, absolutely.
The second mortgage is
Second mortgage. So if mum and dad have a mortgage on their property, then we can either use the bank that they already have the property with, or we can, use another bank. And yeah, the bank will just come in and, let's say they have a $100,000 loan on their property and we need another $100,000 loan. The bank will just register a second mortgage for the second $100,000. So relies on a few different things. Mum and dad generally, we'd like them to be working, or at least have the ability to, not put them in financial distress by, offering the guarantee. And we want to have a plan to look at, what that guarantee looks like into the future.
So it sounds like it's the kind of thing that would want to be set up right to make sure that every party's protected. Don't just walk into your local branch and say, hey, this is what I want to do. Make sure you get some advice on how to set it up right.
Definitely.
But in short, mum and dad's house is effectively the insurance policy against the kids being able to repay the mortgage, yeah?
Absolutely.
Question from Emma. Thanks for the question, Emma. Emma used to work here, so I hope the young family's going well. Em wants to know, she said, we've had a property in Queensland for a few years now. Every time it's time to renew, the property manager says we should not ask for a rent increase. They say we're getting top dollar for the particular market and sit tight, whereas we're saying always increase your rent. Boz, do you want to jump in first with that?
Sure. So being slightly under the market rent, but ensuring you have a tenant 52 weeks of the year is a really smart strategy, especially if you're holding several properties in the portfolio. It just mitigates your risk, and over a 12-month period, you're a long way in front than if you try to push for top dollar when it's unreasonable. With that said, most property managers out there take the path of least resistance. That's kind of human nature, and they're not going to create a potentially difficult conversation for themselves to get you more rental income if the easiest thing to do is suggest no change and keep the tenant happy. So you need to be, in line with Cam's suggestions in the book, be consistently reviewing rent. If you're at the top of the market rent or market rent, then that's okay. Rent cycles. But always have a conversation that goes something like this. Think about how much it's going to cost the tenant to move. So there's the hassle, the time hassle, probably the babysitters, the removalists. I've moved a few times. It's probably 800 to $1,000, right?
Yeah.
So,
how's your size? $3,000.
Start a removalist business for yours. Based on that, you can fairly reasonably, even in a relatively flat rental market, negotiate a $10 a week increase. And if it's couched the right way, have the tenants understanding that they're actually going to be in front and save themselves the hassle compared to moving just to try to find something cheaper. So there's a couple of points there. Don't be greedy, don't risk vacancy, but you've got to understand the market, and if there's room to move, this investment stuff's a business and you want to maximise your cash flow.
Yeah, and the other, sorry, you go.
No, I know what you're going to say, which is what triggered my memory.
Oh, the other end of it is when you're first renting your property out, and I might not be popular for saying it, I think Boz does the same, and it's not all up to the property manager, so I need to be active in it every time. I'll be looking at what's happening in the market, what are the properties renting for. I will always set my rent about $10 below what I think the market rate is, because if I've got a tenant, they're paying rent. If I don't, it's, as Boz said, it's cost you what, $520 a year not having a tenant, or the $10 a week does, sorry, $520 per year. Yeah. I'll just take them up front. I've got a tenant, the other people don't. I've got a tenant, I'll creep it up, and then, as Boz was saying, I'll start to assess, is it going to cost more to move? Are they a good tenant? They've been here long. If you don't want them, yeah, shove it up $20. If you want them, maybe keep it the same. So it's just about weighing it up. Yes, your property manager is integral to that, but very important. I'm very active in it, understanding what's happening in the market and where I'm setting the rents. I'm working with them. We're a team.
Yeah. The other thing that I'd say is $10 a week, for example, every year for 3 years is far better than going from here with an increase of $30 a week at the end of year 3.
Yeah.
So $10 a week is an incremental increase. It's something that people can handle. It becomes kind of second nature. The moment you start talking to someone about having to pay $1,500 extra a year, even though they've been on a great deal for that 3 years, that's a shock to the system, and you risk vacancy.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a direct message in from Ben. When you start investing, there's usually a 2 to 3 year gap between purchases. Any advice on what to do in the meantime? I think, and if I probably paraphrase the questions more, is that Ben might be saying, do you pay down debt? Do you put your money elsewhere? Do you put it in shares? Do you buy lollipops? I don't know what you do. But I think the question is, how do I best prepare myself to buy the next property?
Yeah. Do you want to take that, Amanda?
Oh, no, I'll let you answer
okay.
that one.
I'll throw you a couple of handballs. So the first thing is assuming your property's low cost to hold and you've got a good savings plan going, continue to do that. Offset accounts are really handy. Yeah. I don't know whether it's just the landscape. I'm seeing a lot of younger investors that haven't even actually heard of offset accounts. So I might get you to maybe give people an explanation of what one is and how it can work effectively. But continue to save. And offset accounts, as Amanda will tell you in a second, are far more effective than actually paying down debt for a few reasons. But be understanding, I guess, where you can be getting the best return on that money in line with your personal circumstances and making sure you've always got buffers in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So to answer your question around what is an offset, So an offset account is basically just a savings account, operates exactly the same as any other savings account would, but the benefit is that it is attached to your loan. So depending on how your psychology works, it's either earning you the same amount of interest as you are paying on your loan, or it's saving you the amount of interest that you'd be paying on your loan. So if I had $100 sitting in a bank account and it was paying me 1%, maybe if I'm lucky at the moment, I don't earn 1% on that. I actually pay tax on the 1% that I earn. So let's just call it 0.5% for round figures, as I know Boz likes round figures.
50 cents for every $100.
Whereas if I put that in an offset account, I have exactly the same access to everything as I would, but I actually maybe earn the 3 or 4% interest that I'd be paying on my loan, and I don't pay tax on that money. So your money's working probably 4 times harder for you in an offset account than it would be.
So just to give everyone an example with numbers so they can understand exactly what an offset account is. Let's say that you've got a loan of $520,000. Then you're paying interest on $520,000. If you have a loan of $520,000 with an offset account attached to it that has $20,000 worth of savings in it, your interest is calculated on only $500,000.
And I think, Ben, if I talk about it philosophically, the key you want to do is make sure you're set up to buy your next property. So the best way to do that is to take the money, have your budget, do your budget per normal, and any surplus money is put away, because it's dangerous to have there, I'll go overseas, I'll go on a cruise, I'll buy a new car, I'll get a boat, I'll get a caravan, whatever it might be. What you want to do is make sure you can't see it, it's out of sight, out of mind, and you're moving towards your next purchase all the time. Anything else on that?
Only what we've talked about already, review rates. Every bit of savings, etc., in there can accelerate you towards the next one quicker.
Got a question here. How can self-employed borrowers, how can they refinance their homes? Which banks are better? How challenging is it? What do they need to do? Get a good broker.
Yeah, get a good broker. Self-employed borrower is not necessarily any more challenging than someone being employed PAYG, provided they've had an ABN that's been registered for 2 years and the business has been trading fairly consistently. Most of the banks will look at self-employed borrowers. There's a few that don't specialise in them, but no, it's not harder to get a loan for a self-employed person. You just need someone who understands financials and can present it in the right way. And other than that, it's a straightforward deal for the bank.
And should you use the same bank to buy your investment property as your own home? Boz, here's 15 minutes for you just to roll the sleeves
We've got a broker here, but I'm going to give you the 101 on finance.
Probably had to take it from both ways.
You can chime in after. I got burnt in 2005. I've never forgot it because a broker was more worried about the commission than my structure and where I wanted to go with my investment portfolio. So the whole issue of being tied in and what we call cross-collateralized by using the same bank and using an existing property as direct security against the investment property is basically the bank has all of the control. You have none of the flexibility. There's no disclosure around valuations and they're calling all of the shots. That's not a recipe for building a portfolio when there are other ways to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we have so many choices in lenders these days that unless you need to give one bank all the power and control over everything, it's definitely wiser to diversify and separate. There are certain circumstances, it could be valuations that lead us to use one lender. But if we are doing that, we're trying to keep standalone securities where one property is only secured by one loan, not tying everything together.
So how do we do that? So it's easy to say don't cross-collateralise. I guess what's the solution and how would you recommend setting that up?
So if we went to the same bank, are you saying, or if we use different lenders?
If someone comes to you and says, I've got my own home, I'm buying an investment property, how do you suggest they go about it?
So pretty much, let's say with Bank A, we would put their own home, either with their existing bank or a different bank. We'd probably take equity out of that property as well to fund the deposit and costs on the new property. And we'd look at Bank B to put their investment property there. So literally Bank A, only we need to talk to them about that own property. And Bank B, we talk to them about the new investment.
So do Bank A care that you've gone and taken some more money against their loan to use it over here? What do you tell them? What happens?
Well, we need to disclose the purpose of the money and why we're taking the equity out of that existing property. So provided they can understand that that's to fund the deposit and costs for another purchase, no problem.
No, I'm not saying be dodgy, but I think people get concerned at saying, oh, hang on, that sounds misleading to my bank. It's a legitimate thing that is very commonly done.
And the bank has to assess your ability to not only repay the equity that you're taking out of your home, but that new debt that you're taking on as well. So either way, the whole situation's assessed.
Yep.
It's just diversifying and giving less control to one particular bank, so that when we do want to, duplicate and build a portfolio down the track, we've got a better chance of being able to take equity out and not having one bank have all the power whether to lend us money or not.
Yeah, and that becomes really important. Obviously, different markets cycle at different times. So if you've got, say, a property in Melbourne and a property in Perth, for example, then those markets don't move at the same time. In the last 3 to 4 years, the balance of power has seen Melbourne being pretty strong, Perth's been pretty flat, in a slight decline. So if you had both properties with the same lender, they're basically going to split the difference on the valuations and give you this much.
Yeah.
Whereas if the Melbourne property is with one bank and the Perth property is with a different bank, we have the flexibility because we can just go back to the lender that has the Melbourne property, extract the equity and look to bank C for the next one.
Absolutely.
And we started the show talking about, I guess, the various things through the year, and let's talk specifically about the big event that happened in May, being the election, APRA,
I thought it was your birthday.
and interest rates. And you talked about Warren Buffett before, and I guess if we look at May, telling someone to invest in property would be like saying to them, go and build a snowman down at the beach. It was just something people couldn't comprehend because they'd heard this news about things, market falling, what's happening. And we were saying to people, and we were accused of being, I guess, overzealous with, you're always saying buy property, you're always saying buy property. And we corrected them by saying, yes, but it's specifically where you buy property when the fundamentals are right. So, and we've seen clients and we've seen investors in the market and homeowners get growth of, circa 10% in a lot of cases in the last 6 months, which is unheard of. How do people against the tide, if you see remember those docos when there's a bear catching salmon coming down the river? It's almost like going against the tide. They're going, well, it's not the right time. How do people get the confidence, and dream crushes will kill them, but how do people get the confidence they're going to do it? Like, how are those people doing it in May and April? And others are going, well, the sky's falling and I'm not going near it.
Did it work for the bear?
The bear's getting them.
The bear's getting fed. Happy days for the bear.
There's 3 analogies in one little question. It's astonishing what I've done there. That's why I'm the host. That's why I'm the host.
We'll get your car seat next time. So one of the things that, or the way that I like to explain it to people is, with the benefit of hindsight, if you could have bought wherever you live 20 years ago, would you have done it?
What did you say to your mum?
Yeah, I'll get to that. I told her she was getting, I suggested that she was getting old and she didn't really like it, but it was a long time ago, she's got over it. But I was right. That's the important part. I'm yet to meet someone that wouldn't have bought 20 years ago with hindsight. Now, in that time, there have been a whole bunch of turbulence in the property markets due to GFCs and the recessions that we had to have, and the Asian financial crisis where international stock markets lost 60%. Not a couple of percent here or there, but 60%. So full stock market crash. All of these things have occurred, but over the long term, properties work pretty well. So the thing I say, don't try and time it to the week or the month. There's never going to be a perfect time. There are so many factors that influence what property markets do. But if you're investing in locations that have a relative undersupply, and you're investing in areas that are going to attract population growth due to amenity and jobs and government investment, that's a pretty good recipe long term.
Yep.
Don't try and make money in 2 weeks. It's not a get-rich-quick thing.
And were you seeing, as the market was correcting, not coming back, correcting, were you seeing people step in then and go, I need my mortgage done? Was that an impetus to go, there's changes in the wind, I need to do it?
Yeah, I think anytime there's change, being in the housing market or the lending market, it brings up the topic of, I better do something about my loan. So yeah, smart people were kind of looking at what they could do, especially taking advantage of rate falls during that time.
Yeah.
And I think the bigger question, it's just surrounding yourself with experts, people that can point you in the right direction. Listen to the people that are getting results and just not listening to all the noise out there. And
I talk to lots of people, right? And a common one that they talk about is the assessment rate on their loan. They say, well, I can get a loan at 3.25%. Why are they assessing me at 6 or whatever they're going to be assessing them at? Why don't they assess what I'm paying? Like, what's the reason?
So, post Royal Commission, there's been quite a substantial change to all sorts of assessment rates, and it definitely has improved serviceability in some ways. Some of the banks have even dropped their assessment rates 2 or 3 times now in the last couple of months. But what the bank has to do essentially is to assess your repayments on the rate that you're paying, plus a minimum of a 2.5% buffer. So that's to allow for future interest rate rises and, you know, just ensure that they're lending responsibly so that
It's a lot of rate rises.
even when rates do rise, you've still got the ability to repay.
Try 1% buffer.
So we've only really got one bank left at the moment that's assessing at 8% still.
Yep.
The rest are kind of, their floors have dropped down to the low 5%. So
Yep.
for owner occupiers, you know, low 5%. For investors, we're still kind of in the low to mid 6% assessment rates.
And Stacey Williams has joined, and she said, I hear the RMs at OpenCorp are amazing in helping their clients on their journey. No, I'm joking, Stace. Well, thanks for joining. I've got a question here from Jack. Hey guys, what would the difference be in holding costs between new and established if hypothetically the houses were exactly the same size, location and rent? And it's going to come down to depreciation factors, stamp duty I guess a little bit, but not so much anymore, Boz. What are the key pieces there for people when they're weighing up? Do I go this one or this one? They're side by side, next door to each other, brand new versus second hand.
Yeah, it'll basically come down to the holding costs will be a lot more on the established property because you've got rent and tax benefits that allow you to be able to generate income to fund these properties. I'd go far as saying that the rent would actually be lower on an established property, but even if we leave that out, your tax benefits will be lower due to the depreciation not being as high on an established property.
Yep.
Depending on how old it is, if it's pre-1985, there'll be zero depreciation anyway. And if you bought it as an established property, given some of the changes in the last 12 to 18 months with tax law, you might not even be able to claim any of the depreciation on the fixtures and fittings components as well. So that's an impact, but the risk is a lot higher on the established property because older properties break down more and you've got to spend more on maintenance. So the thing that's not well understood around maintenance is that you can't generate any more rent if you've spent money on maintenance. So if there's some value add, you know, let's say that you were putting in an air conditioner, for example, or letting the tenant, one from back in the day was put a Foxtel connection in a rental, they would generally, contribute. You could generally ask them to contribute to that cost. And I didn't mind that at all because they're not going to put a Foxtel connection in today and move next month, right? They're going to be here long term. So that was a good indicator of a quality tenant. But if you've got, if the hot water service is 10 years old and it blows up, you can't go back to the tenant and say, oh, hey, we're going to put the rent up $20 a week to pay for the hot water service. So all of that maintenance is coming out of your cash flow, which can be a big risk, obviously.
Yeah, and I think maintaining your cash flow is a key bit when you buy an investment property. We talked at the start of the show about there's a percentage of people who had a bad experience, the head's in the sand, I'll never invest again. How are these people succeeding? I'm not. And cash flow and controlling your cash flow is one of the absolute key ones. You buy an 80-year-old property as your investment property because it was cheap, you rent it out, the tenants are bad, the sink falls out of the house, the stumps collapse, the weatherboards fall off, you've spent 50 grand in the first year fixing those things. Guess what? You're selling it and getting out as quick as you can. Versus someone who buys a brand new property, they've got a strategy, they've got a structure they're following, their rent's good, their rent's on time, there's no maintenance issues, list goes on, good experience. So it's so vital to make sure you're buying the right property, using the right strategy, and controlling your cash flow foremost is absolutely fundamental to the whole journey.
Yeah, and the other thing, like we're talking about expenses relating to one property, but you know, if you're adding multiple properties into the portfolio, then those risks magnify. If you have 3 hot water services in a month, then that's a world of hurt, right?
Yeah.
So it's about making sure that not only you minimise the cash flow for each one, but it helps you minimise the risk across the portfolio. But great question, Jack. Good to see you online.
And do you budget? Sorry, we're still answering, Jack. I just wanted the last say. Do you budget into your portfolio? There's going to be maintenance across the year.
Yeah.
So you sit there, start a year and go, well, I need to set aside this because there'll be maintenance for this, whatever it might be. When do people start doing it? How do they view it? Because I know there's pushback. People go, well, I bought a new property and why would I ever spend anything on it? And your analogy is great about the Mercedes or the brand new car, but when did you start going, I need to put some money aside here?
So I had a $5,000 buffer day one of my first investment property. And after getting to about property 4 or 5, I realised I hadn't touched the buffer. And maybe I was super conservative with what I needed, but I kept it anyway because you know costs can magnify. But for those that aren't aware of the analogy that Al's talking about, just because you buy a brand new car doesn't mean that you don't get it serviced. You don't just go, oh, well, I'll drive it for 5 years without getting service because it's brand new. A little bit of money spent on a regular basis, just maintaining it and protecting against major expenditure in one hit is really smart. So it's kind of like the landlord's equivalent of what we were talking about before with Emma's question in the tenant. A little bit every year is far better than nothing for a while and then a big hit.
Yeah. And what you're saying about just doing regular maintenance doesn't get more rent. It's not an upgrade. It's just someone knocked a hole in the wall. I plastered it up. It cost me $300. Your rent's the same. You just haven't got a hole in the wall. It's just a repair.
Keep the tenant happy. They're going to stay long term. More rent, more cash flow overall.
So a question from Darren, and yeah, Jack, thanks for that question. It was great. A question from Darren, which is firmly in your wheelhouse. What is a good rate for investors at the moment?
Oh, okay. So
She got a shiver then, so.
Oh, exciting.
That's
Talking
my
about
rates.
No, rates are one puzzle piece. They're not the be-all and end-all of lending. But for investment loans at the moment, if we have interest-only payments, then there are some rates out there from about 3.29% at the moment. Mid 3% to high 3% is where most of the banks are sitting, with P&I repayments for people who do choose to, pay down some of their debt. We're in the low 3% at the moment, so those are where your sharpest rates are. And if you're paying any more than about 4% at the moment, it's probably time for a review.
329. Interest only.
Interest only.
Wow. Darren's Amanda's boyfriend. She set him up to it. Just joking. If we see any more questions, if the questions, send them through. If there's not, we'll probably start to wrap it up in the next couple of minutes, guys. So if there are there, get them through to us pretty quickly. Media is the other one, and especially going into this time of year, people have got more time to sit around and read it. And I've probably read, you said at the start about election weekend, when the paper was bipolar. But even the last 2 weeks, I'm just reading, one day it's positive, there's growth in Melbourne, the market's recovered, this is happening, the next day there's doom and gloom and it's horrible and it's terrible. And it's going to continue over this period when everyone's got more time on their hands to sit down and think about it, read the papers, talk to friends. I've got a strategy. I know the stats I look at. So there's 4 or 5 key ones that mean everything to me in any property market that I absolutely live by. Other people out there don't. What's the advice for them?
The advice I would say is understand that the journalist wants to sell papers or sell clickbait. The big one that I'll point out, the average house price in Australia is not measured. What's measured is the median house price, and the two are different. So the median house price is a middle value in a line of sales from cheapest to most expensive. So whenever you read an article that talks about the average house price in Sydney or the average house price in Adelaide, disregard it straight away because they don't actually know what they're talking about to start with. So just understand, I guess, what you're reading and what their motivation might be. That's a pretty good place to start.
Yeah, Amanda?
Yeah, I think, again, just look at the source of where the information's coming from. Have you trusted sources? If you questions, verify it with the experts, and really just, stick to what you know and what you think you should be.
I was so happy. So hopefully everyone out there knows Tom Petrovsky from ComSec. He's the guy that has now got the ripping beard, stands there stiff as a board on the late night news saying what happened with the share market for the day, with all those people pretending to work in the background and the screen. So Tom did a short video on an article that was posted a couple of days ago, basically around the rebound in median house prices and all this stuff. And he said it was basically 3 key things. It was due to the election decision, it was due to APRA reducing the lending restrictions, and it was due to interest rates dropping. I'm like, if only Tom Petrovsky had been at our client night 6 months ago and heard us tell clients about it then.
Absolutely.
But he was singing the same message, so that was good.
There's a question from Michael we'll get to in a second. And the other thing this time of year is New Year's resolutions. So question without notice to people. Did you have one last year, or any, multiple, whatever? Did you achieve them, and are you planning on having them going forward into this year? And if you want to share them, what were they?
Oh, I did have a New Year's resolution, and I started off my new for the first 3 months of the year doing some PT and getting really heavily involved in exercising. And then I blew out my knee, which sidelined me for a good chunk of the year. So my New Year's resolution this year is probably going to be the same as last year because no, I did not achieve it. But the motivation and the desire there is still to achieve it. And I think for me, not having a goal or something to focus on and move forward towards, my year would just go nowhere. So really important for me.
In that process, though, you've learned some stuff and improved some stuff and tweaked some stuff. So it's no different to, like we were talking about before, just because something happens or you hit a roadblock, you haven't thrown the towel in and put the feet up and said, I've stopped. You've done something positive towards getting it. I don't set New Year's resolutions. I kind of set goals consistently, but mine was around exercise. I've done a lot of cycling since I stopped racing triathlon and wasn't losing any weight despite watching my diet, and I was reasonably strong and fit from the hips down, but not on my upper body. So I got into a new training regime. It's been great for me. Goals achieved and some. So it's been good.
Yeah, I set a fitness goal, which was I wanted to bench press 135. Got there this week. Yay for me. That's why I'm asking the question.
That's why you drive.
That's why I'm asking the question. And the second one was to take advantage of the falling property market. And pre-May, I purchased some property. I've taken advantage of it. I've seen the growth. So both of those achieved. And like Boz, I'm fairly goal driven. They're constant. They're always in front of me at home. But New Year's is a good time to just reflect on where you're at and assess what they're like and make sure you're kicking off the new year, fresh and on track. So it is important, people, make sure they're achievable, make sure they're measurable, and make sure they're things that are worthwhile.
Just a holiday tip and thinking about New Year's time and resolutions. Any real estate agents in holiday destinations are probably going to want to shoot me after this. But one of the most common emotionally based mistakes that we see is people go away somewhere for a summer holiday, they're relaxed, they think, how good's this, the lifestyle's amazing, I could live here forever, and they're in this la-la land of just, relaxation and happiness, hanging out with their family, and then realise that they use it 2 times over the next 3 years and it probably wasn't so great. So just a heads up, by all means do a bit of window shopping.
It's fun.
Don't sign any deposit checks unless you're really serious that that's where you want to be spending a lot of time. But it's very hard with kids and kids sport. If you've got kids, probably not going to happen as often as what you want.
I agree with Boz. Go and look. Many real estate agents have my fingerprints on their windows as I'm looking at their properties. But I understand the pitfalls of it. It's not exactly what it looks like. So a question from Michael is, do you require a substantial cash flow to sustain the repayments on the land component of a house and land build?
Great question.
Yeah, really good question. Who wants to take that one?
We can both take it. Do you want to?
Yeah, I was going to say,
Well, maybe
talk about the type of loan and how it works.
And how the loan structured, and Boz can talk about.
Yeah, when we're, looking to take equity out of a property, or we're, having a savings amount to put towards buying a house, generally we're taking that into consideration. So not only how much do we need to fund the actual purchase and pay the stamp duty and all the other costs, but also how we're going to pay the loan between when it settles, the land settles, and when we actually get tenants into the property.
Yeah. And so probably the follow on from that is maybe just talk everyone through what a construction loan is and how it differs, how it works, and how it's different to a normal residential loan.
Loan. Good question as a host.
Depending on the lender and how they set up their construction loans, basically, the land part of the loan essentially gets paid in full when we buy the land. We have to hand that over to the vendor. But for the construction, the bank retains all of that money and it hands it over to the builder in stages as the property gets built. So effectively, day one of our construction loan, we might only be paying $100 a month in repayments. Month 2 or month 3, once we've got a frame up and things like that, might go up to $400 a month. And over the 6 or 9 month process of the build, those repayments gradually increase. So you're not paying everything up front. You're only needing to fund interest as the loan gets.
So if the bank's lending 90% and your total borrowing's 500, 300, 250 is land, 250 is the house. Do they lend 90 of the land then? Or
90% of the total purchase price.
So you put your bid in first?
Yep.
Okay, that's how the bank will assess it.
Absolutely. So all of your money goes towards paying for it first before the bank will hand over their money, and then they will drip feed the rest.
Okay.
So Michael, it really, I guess, how that, we call it interest during construction, is that the interest while on the construction loan while the house is being built between land settlement and when you have a tenant. So that's where it can differ in terms of different people's scenarios. So if you have equity in the existing property, as Amanda said, you factor in that interest during construction allowance to what we borrow from the equity loan. And that means that there's nothing out of pocket through to the point where you have a tenant. I feel like normality's been restored. If you have a cash deposit and a really good rate of saving, then it doesn't make any sense to wait until you've got the interest during construction covered if you've got strong cash flow to be able to pay that as you go. So That's really a situation where we look at every client's individual scenario, help them understand that budgeting. But to give you a benchmark on a typical kind of property, we're talking around $350 a week on average over a worst case construction timeframe.
Thank you, Boz.
No worries.
I thought I'd been very stealth there in putting the hat on until I can slowly see in the replay that I'm not. So we're going to wrap the show there. Thanks everyone for their questions. Thanks everyone for tuning in during the year. We've had a great time doing the shows. Hope you've enjoyed them. We see the minute counts even after the shows. I think we hit 100,000 minutes last month, which is very exciting for us. Lots of people tuning in and loving it. We'll be back in the new year. Please cancel your holidays. It'll be in January. No, just joking. Won't be in January. We'll be on holidays. It'll be in February. And our producer Danny's even talking about putting us out on location. I think he wants to get a suntan. But everyone have a great Christmas. Good luck with your investing. Don't buy a holiday house. And thanks Amanda and Boz for joining us.
Thanks everyone. See you next year. Have a great Christmas.
We do small talk now. Small talk. Because they can still hear us. They can hear us. Danny is
that actually really